Running our own business isn't easy, and it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And on Scale Up Radio, we aim to help make things just that little bit easier by interviewing guests who have been where you are now, regardless of where you are on the scale-up journey, and maybe facing some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked well for them, as well as what didn't, of course. And we've also combined many of these lessons into a practical scale-up handbook called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And there's details of this at the end of the episode. So welcome to Scale Up Radio.
Hello, Rupert Maspero, and welcome to Scale Up Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, I'm Rupert. I'm a co-founder and director at a digital agency called mmtm, but spelt mmtm. And we build digital tools and platforms for other businesses.
I've got to ask, mmtm, where did that come from? Because I've looked at your website and looked at the name. I thought, oh, that's interesting.
It's actually a kind of a funny little origin story kind of piece. But we started off founding the business as three of us, two other of my friends, both from school, after we came back from university. And one of the guys is a little F1 obsessed. And it was very trendy in the early 2000s to just remove all the vowels from your name in tech startups. And he always wanted to call his F1 team Momentum, but without a few of the vowels, but it never looked quite right. So he removed a few of the consonants as well. And I think we were just mucking around the summer before we started the business, and we got something delivered to the office, and so he just put up a thing stuck in the window that said that was mmtm offices, and that's how it came about, because we had a parcel delivered and we needed a sign on the door.
Brilliant. Well, we'll explore a bit more of that in detail shortly. But and your role, Rupert, what's your role in the business now? Because you talked about three of you.
Yeah, so actually, this, again, not to jump through the story, but there's now two of us running the chaps. Actually, the guy who came up with Momentum, John, has moved on to other things, I think, for various reasons, lots of COVID and effort and all that kind of stuff. And I think he wanted to grow slightly differently to where we were going. So my role in the business is mostly as now sort of effectively CTO kind of. I'm in charge of the development teams and the technical planning. I do a little bit of accounts management and stuff, but most of my remit sits around the technology side and the product that we deliver. And then my business partner, Martin, who deals with most of the sort of sales and marketing side of bits and pieces, and a lot more account management and product management than I do.
Awesome. So tell us about Momentum. You talked about a digital agency, tools and digital stuff. What do you do for your clients?
It's a really common question. I think a lot of what we do inevitably bamboozles and boggles people, and it's very hard to explain, but without like a visual graphic, which is maybe a podcast isn't the best medium for. But the idea is essentially people have lots of, its core form is people have lots of spreadsheets or data or processes. And sometimes those processes are manual. Sometimes they're slightly digital or slightly automated. Sometimes those processes are just on old platforms. And we take those, we workshop with our clients to turn that into a web app or mobile app, effectively a online platform where they can track progress and manage their processes and data and effectively drive growth for them. It's kind of hard to do without examples. And like it really ranges. So you've got e-learning platforms where people can sign up, buy courses, go through online lectures, online courses, take quizzes, and get certificates at the end. You've got hair dyeing stuff for salons where people need to take a patch test physically on their arm and take photographs to prove they've done the test. And then that can tell the salon they're good to get their hair dyed. It could be in defense, things like tracking instances of drones around the world, or in fact, like even like VR kind of headset kind of stuff around booking and scheduling VR experiences. So it's a real minefield of like different industries, but basically at its core concept, the idea is to help other people grow their business and make it more productive. And like that's a key measure for us of like whether we've been successful in what we're doing. And we do that, at least in our part, by focusing on building automation and digital platforms.
Right. Yes. Okay. So I can understand that. You talked about a whole massive range of different customers that have come to you. Why do they come to? How do they find you? You know, what's their sort of, you know, why do they come knocking on the door?
Yeah, it's probably something we'll cover later when we could talk about maybe what we didn't do so well at the beginning, but finding people and people finding us has always been an interesting one in terms of often the people that need us are the people that don't realize they need us. It's the people that think, oh, well, this is working. This works. If I just throw more at it, I'll be able to do more of my work. You know, it's classic kind of like, oh, if we need to train more people, maybe we just need more trainers. Or if we need, you know, more light, let's light more candles. And someone else is sat there going like, how about a light bulb kind of thing? And that's, it's kind of finding those people has been quite tricky for us, but actually the best method so far has been networking and just actually building that trust, especially when people buy digital things or buying into this automation stuff or platforms. It can be quite intangible and quite hard for people to understand. And you don't want to spend thousands of pounds on something that you're not sure is going to work or is the right thing for you. And so a large part of what we've been tooling our work set to do is try and help people validate early on, produce visuals so people can understand what they're going to get as a deliverable, and then communicate that through case studies of other people so like people can see it. But honestly, most of it comes through word of mouth and that kind of thing, and a growing network of, I'd say, like advocates, which are mostly our clients. I say ex-clients, really just clients, because most of our clients have long-term relationships with us. So them sort of telling their other entrepreneurs that they reckon they should use us to do this in their business. And that comes kind of through. So,
you know, there are a lot of different web building companies, technology building companies, software building companies. You know, they're very sort of, you know, and you talked about sort of web-based type platforms and systems. What makes you different? You know, what do you strive to be best at?
You're right. And it's like carving out that niche for us. There are a lot of people that build websites. And that's where, again, like communicating exactly what we do is kind of hard, because what we do is not what we would call websites. Yeah. Websites are kind of like your blog or the basic bit you interact with that marketing page. We don't really build those. More of what we build tends to be for people in the business, the back office, the back room, that kind of side of stuff. And so trying to communicate that through can be harder, but it's something that we hopefully, and I think the bit that we do really well, especially listening to lots of like clients that come from past experiences elsewhere and then try us, or we see going on in the industry, is that often people think, oh, well, I have this idea and I've got a development team, and the development team just make my idea. But what you'll find is often that they end up in this quagmire of they spend way more than they were originally planning because costs are ballooned, or there's a language barrier because the people are abroad and the developers don't really understand and haven't communicated and built a relationship up with you, or the visuals don't match up with the idea. And I think like something that sets us apart in that regard is we don't take on a specific developers in our teams to do specific roles in the same way. We don't have a front or back end or a designer. We expect our staff to be full stack, which means they are expected to understand and contribute at every stage, which means there's no like Chinese whispers going inside the business. But then also we try and spend a lot of high touch communication, and workshops are a big part of what we do before we get going. We take you through workshops, we produce mock-ups, we validate that idea. And that means we're de-risking the process for a lot of people. And I think where we're at in terms of the scale of our clients, de-risking is a really big part of it. And so I think the idea from our perspective of what our USP is that I think is summed up by, there's a really nice quote from one of our clients that I really kind of enjoy, along the lines of the fact that we were just incredibly responsive, unfailingly kind, and always on hand, keeping business critical services running, and enthusiastic while doing it. And it's just kind of, I love that one about, obviously I love it. It's nice, it's kind about us, but at the same time, I think it kind of sums up the point, which is like, we want to be a friendly face, and I get technology can be confusing and not so friendly. And that's kind of where we act as like a human interface between the code and real people in real businesses, and what your real, like what you really want as a deliverable. And what actually matters for you as a business might be, you can think about, oh, we'd love this feature, but it's going to cost us $5,000. And you go, there's that understanding of like, we can translate that because you don't necessarily know how much something you want is going to cost. And it can be really hard to understand that. And I think we get our heads inside, the idea is to get our heads inside your business, speak your language and that side of things. And that's something like, it's been a learning curve for us as well. As like, as an agency, we do different industries all the time. And so you've got to immerse yourself in their language and their processes before you can really, truly help.
Yeah. Wow. Brilliant. That answer is just fantastic. I'll tell you now, and you know, if people have listened to my podcast, I have a background running software teams. I'm not a software developer in any shape or fashion, so I had to learn Agile myself and implement it in a business. If we ever get to have a coffee sometime, I'll give you that backstory. But that upfront visual interface, that workshop, as you called them, is so important in the software development phase, because, as you say, your clients haven't a clue what the software is, what you're going to do, having a clue. But that, if the more time you can spend upfront visualizing, creating, is the most powerful thing. So
exactly. And I think so often we see clients that have received like a 5, 10, 15 page document, maybe 50-page document of just user stories of just text describing. And the simple fact is it's almost impossible to visualize or to pick up mistakes, because once you get past page 2, you start to zone out a little bit. And I hate to say it, but like, that's why we prototype and do things like that at the beginning and the visuals, because you'll find that people pick up the mistakes so much faster, or communicate, oh no, I need this button like this, or actually it would be great if we had this functionality. And they'll spot those when you offer that in various mediums.
Perfect. And I used to say to my team, if you can build the front end and then work out the back end afterwards, because most developers will work out the back end and then create the front end. And that was a real dynamic change. And it took about 9 months to get the development team to change that thinking. But once they did that, that really works. And you've just described that perfectly. So
no, I mean, I love the architecture and architecting technical solutions. And that's where like most developers feel at home.
Absolutely.
They love it. They love tinkering in the back end. But the reality is the user doesn't experience that. But it's important for a good front end to have a structured back end, because otherwise you end up reworking things, and the whole process is really risky if you start doing that. And so you want to avoid rework, and that's that kind of buying into the long vision, understanding goals, and like, what is an actual outcome for you look like? Is it that we drive up, and you can use revenue metrics or custom metrics, but they're always a bit vague. And yes, you can measure them, but really what often it looks like is, oh, I just want this to be better. And what does better look like? And let's sketch that out.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as developers, they live in that technical world. They don't necessarily live in the interface thinking world, interaction world, in terms of doing that. But once they do and they get that, it is a transformation activity that takes place in the teams that have that. So and you've just described it brilliantly. Awesome. So the marketplace of software development, the technologies that you use, what's changing in the marketplace? What are the trends? What's happening?
It's a really good question. I think we pitch ourselves as more of a specialist Ruby on Rails house. So Ruby on Rails is a development framework that's used by some big players in the world. Twitter was originally built on it. Airbnb, Shopify, which is like pretty much the world's largest online shop store, and GitHub. Huge companies use the framework, and that just builds the foundation piece of what we really do. And in terms of there are lots of other competing technologies coming in. There's lots of trendy bits, and that in itself is kind of interesting to watch. There's lots of fads, and it's very tricky to navigate the fads but also be at the cutting edge of stuff coming through. And I think so often we see clients and people coming to us, or we see things going on in the industry where people jump on the next fad. It's so exciting. This could be the next best thing. And it's great for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And then they start going like, oh, well, now things are moved on. How do we keep building with this? And have we now built ourselves into a corner? And so I think from our perspective, there are things moving on. Historically, there's been a lot of, I guess, in the last 5 years, chat about front-end frameworks, React, and that kind of stuff, and pieces. And those are still there. I think people who jumped in full depth into those kind of things are now finding themselves trying to pull themselves out of the quagmire. But learning to use those tools where appropriate, I think, is always the hardest bit with web development. I think that's something, again, maybe I like it's that balance between being overly cautious but also being at the edge. And so I think we try and look at stuff that's moving on. And also, as a business owner, you don't want the latest fancy framework. You don't really care if it's in the latest fancy framework or the new shiny tool that's just been released. What you care is if it does the thing, right? Does using this framework mean hitting the button is going to be 10 times faster? Then yes. If it means it's going to be exactly the same speed, but there's no other devs to do the work, or it's actually in 3 years' time, it's new and you need to figure it out, and you're effectively paying for the developer to work that out on your time. Those are not business sensible decisions. And like so often that is the case. In terms of other bits in the industry, I think like Ruby itself, or the language we use, is actually having a bit of a revival at the moment, which is kind of nice to see. But yeah, so I think like longer term, bigger, I wouldn't want to bet.
So how big are you at the moment? How many staff?
So you're a team of about 8 of us. And it's a funny one. We've sort of grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk. I mean, we grew quite a lot. First few years were a bit slow, didn't move too much. And then we grew quite a bit. COVID hit, inevitably. And weirdly, because we book our work so far in advance, and we sort of didn't feel anything for about 6 months, and then started to feel a bit of a pinch. But then there was suddenly, so we lasted a few months there, and then we sort of experienced a wave of all these businesses being like, yes, we now need to spend 2 years worth of budget in 6 months. And we're like, yeah, amazing, boom. But that all dries up as soon as people realize that they've now spent 2 years budget in 6 months. And so it kind of like, there's that fluctuation of trying to get numbers up and building that. And I think it's also a case of like, from our perspective as a business, working out where we want to go. What's our, I guess, exit strategy? It might seem a bit harsh, but what's the exit strategy? Like most business owners, there's a goal of making some money and probably getting out and doing something new at some point, or is there a transition strategy? And trying to work out what size, like, you don't want to become a fish that's too big to be eaten by someone else, but also you don't want to be the small guy struggling. And it's kind of that balancing act, I think, is something that we've tried to marshal ourselves with a little bit and stay on the line, work out what is the right size for us.
Yeah. Wow.
Without losing any of like what makes it special as a business either, because you get bigger, absolutely. And then you just get systems and you get so remote and detached.
Yes, that discussion and debate about what size is good, and we call it the scale up journey. You know, and 8 is that ideal of that sort of, you're about 2 teams. The next level is then 4 teams. Its stability
and
platform is based on the team size rather than revenue. In terms of
and I think one thing that I find has sort of confused us also at times is like, I think as an entrepreneur, you associate more people, bigger team with more profit, better business, and it's so not true. It's just, and someone can tell you that so many times it's not true, but it's not true. And like sometimes you're way more profitable with fewer people, or the right people in the right places. And again, that's something I think when we were starting out in Bits, we'd hire a few hire devs, and we'd hire people that were more experienced or more senior, and you're paying, especially in developer market, salaries skyrocket between, like, if anyone's got over about 3 years experience, their salaries start to skyrocket quite quickly. And you could be talking, suddenly you've gone from someone who was somewhere in the region of £30,000 a year to someone who's £80,000 a year, with like 2 years difference in experience. And you're kind of going, how is this sustainable as a business? And also working out what most people need and what most businesses need from us isn't an £80,000 dev with lots of like 10 years of experience and really niche knowledge on this service. Most challenges and automations and stuff we do for people are actually, really, really impactful. The biggest stuff is often the simplest stuff. And a really good example of that, I hate to say it, it's such a classic one, but like in a lot of our systems is email reminders, reminding people to put information in, automating sending stuff out, those kind of bits. Like, one, they're the biggest time savers in other businesses. They allow businesses to scale up the most, just like setting those things to go off without anyone interacting, or reminding someone to do the reporting every Friday.
Yeah.
Like, those are the kind of things that make the biggest impact. And you don't need to spend stupid money on someone with oodles of experience to do that. And I think that's where, like, coming back to the original question around team size, was where I think there was those lessons we've learned along the way, which is number of people doesn't correlate to output and revenue as a business owner.
Absolutely. And as you grow, you add complexity. So complexity in terms of management, complexity in terms of organization, and we call it the valleys of death. So in between each of those pillars, and the stability comes in organization, not just profitability. And in between is those pillars, because if you take on people, well, which team are they going to fit in? Now, one team's more complex than the other team. How are we going to integrate that structure? Actually, we now need more revenue because we've got that extra person in. We've got to now manage that more. We've got a more payroll to support. We've got, and suddenly if you get it wrong, as you say, it's often more profitable to move back to where you were than where you were trying to head to in terms of doing things. Yeah, very true. Very true. So let's go back to the start. And why did Mind and Momentum kick off, and when was it?
Right. The origin story. So I think it was 2015. Myself and two of my friends from school, as I mentioned earlier, Martin and John. Martin and John had both graduated. I had another year to do with my master's because I'd gap yeared, so delayed everything. But I'd had a summer job every year, and this was like going to be my final summer job of uni between third and fourth year. And we said, why are we bothering with summer jobs? Let's just see what we can do. Let's spend a summer learning stuff and see if we can build something. So we conveniently sort of found one of the guys' dads actually had, I was going to call it office space, but it's more of an abandoned building. If anyone knows Gloucestershire, they might know where Dunkerton's is on the outside of Cheltenham by the reservoir. Before Dunkerton bought that, there was the left-hand building, which I think has the clothing brand stuff in it, was sort of abandoned. There was a hole above the sink in the ceiling, and we had to like like hotspot Wi-Fi in, and but we had basically had a derelict building to ourselves. So it was kind of a really weird one, but we had a lot of office space, but it was pretty much disrepair. And so we found that kind of space because we thought if we make it if we have an actual environment to go into work, our parents won't kill us, and we'll also have like a real incentive and a work day and a structure to it all. So we sort of turned up there and sort of hashed out a plan, like what we're going to do. We're going to learn this stuff, and then we're going to build this. And what we built was the idea was an app for other YouTubers. And the idea was going to build like a white labeled app that YouTubers could put their content in and communicate with their fan bases outside of YouTube. So we didn't really get around to building much of that at the summer. We did a lot of learning and a lot of messing about, which was great fun. But I obviously then had to go back to uni to do my master's. So I finished my master's and was finishing my master's. And around March time, the two other boys gave me a call and said, look, we're not making much headway with these app ideas, but we have had two people we know ask us to build something for them, something completely different. And I think one was an invoicing timesheet tool, and one was like a drone incident reporting platform. Around that time was when Gatwick Airport got shut down for like drones that kept flying up. And we've been asked, and they had money to pay for these things. And so we're like, well, we might as well. We haven't got paid anything. And the boys phoned me up and were like, should we make this a real thing? So we made it a real thing. I finished uni, graduated on the Friday, started work on the Monday. And by this point, we got ourselves some slightly less derelict offices. But that kind of founded the company effectively. It was us, and sort of made the transition from, let's build some pet projects, into there's really businesses out there that will pay us to build these platforms. And this is going to be viable to be a thing. And I don't think my intention never was to start a business at the beginning of finishing university. I always wanted to run a business. That was always something I wanted to do, but I thought I'd get some real world experience first. But inevitably these things, serendipity happens, the world takes you along for the ride. And it just so happened that that's kind of the case. It made not applying for grad scheme jobs a lot easier as well.
Yeah. Wow. Fantastic. So you took off. So from about 2016 onwards, something like that. Yeah. So from about 2016 onwards, it became like it really took off. And ever since then, it's just been sort of that slow growth, kind of sustainable growth bit. And as I say, obviously the COVID era, a bit bumpy as you kind of expect, but weirdly not in sync, I would say, with most industries in that. But yeah, and it's been kind of working our way through then. And then I think about 2 years ago, our other business partner, John, he sort of decided, like, I think if we got through the COVID stuff, he was like, I'm done with the stress of running my own business. And I think he wanted to work on more product-based stuff. And we do have some of our own products. And through the last few years, there are some things that people come to us a lot for. And we've sort of seen that, and we go, or we've built some expertise in certain industries. Quite a few of our clients work in telecoms, and we hear certain things and we're like, actually, this is something we can build and sell. And so we built a few of our tools, but John always owned that part of the business. And I think during COVID, that sort of struggled quite a lot. And so I think he was looking for something else. And I mean, I'm going for coffee with him on Saturday. So it's actually worked out really well. It was all very amicable, and it was kind of just a different transition. But that itself was quite like as you can imagine, like it's always quite a fractious time when people are like, I'm leaving. And you're like, oh, how does that affect what we're doing? Do we want to still do this? Are we going in the right direction? Have we missed something? But actually, if anything, it sort of meant that as a business, we're more focused and we're driving more towards what we want to do as well, which is really nice. Excellent. So any things didn't go well? And, you talked about hires. So we talked about that, finding the right people. Anything else in terms of advice for people that are building their own software companies?
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. Sales and marketing is something I think we underestimated at the beginning, right? It was through network. There was lots of low hanging fruit through our networks actually, which I think allowed us to neglect sales and marketing as part of the business. And again, we were also quite young, which meant it felt very hard from ourselves internally to sort of legitimately go into a meeting room age 23, 24, into a room full of 40, 50-year-olds and legitimately pitch ourselves as experts that they should spend £50,000 with or £100,000 with. That's like, it felt very, you got that imposter syndrome. And I think it put us all off, like even attempting too much sales or marketing stuff. And again, the sales and marketing pipeline is very different when you're looking at budgets that are 30,000 plus compared to people who are when you're selling like a subscription to a service that's 10, 20, 50 pounds a month. And it's a very different kind of sales thing. And a lot of the sales stuff, advice online is pitched at, oh, you're selling especially for software, so you're selling a SaaS product that is 25 pounds a month, like per user or whatever. And it's a lot of the sales advice is about how to maximize that. And what we were selling was more B2B solutions. And that requires a lot more of a high touch approach. And I think learning and building the pitch decks for that, the biggest mistake we always used to make was investing too heavily in the proposal early days. People are sort of ask you for a proposal or an outline, and really you could spend hours writing a 5-10 page document. And they're going to love that. They're really going to love it, but they're probably not going to pick you still from it. You need to work out when it's worth spending your time. And I think it was a big mistake we used to make was we'd put up these like multi-pages. And actually what we've ended up building out are sort of more an initial slide deck that takes you through like, and helps, again, allay concerns people might have. So it's been like, who are we? Here's photos of our developers and us. So you can put faces to names. These are not random people in random countries that you will never communicate with or meet. Here's a face to a name. Being pretty upfront and clear about our fees, but also something we always did was like include everything in the fee. And so many businesses add it on. So how do you identify that and point out that we're competitive? And so it's been really clear to people that this includes everything. It's not here's $5,000 and it's going to grow to 10 by the time we've done what you want. It's going to be we're pitching at 10 grand because if you want to make changes, those are included, and you will want to make changes. That's how the process works, and that kind of thing. And I think being clear about that comms and trying to find your audience has been really hard for us. We are techie people. We talk to techie people. We use techie things. We live in a techie world. Our natural network is techie people. And our ideal client is probably someone who isn't, is someone who goes, oh yeah, I use email and a bit of Excel. But as soon as you start to ask me to use lots of formulas or a macro or something like that, they go, no, thank you. I've got other things to do in my world. And again, as I say, like referring back a bit earlier to what I sort of about that imposter syndrome is you've got to get in front of the decision maker. And this is where, again, selling what we have is kind of tricky. And I think this applies to a lot of people, which is the people that use what you sell might not be the decision makers. And getting those decision makers on board as well as the users is vital, because you need both parts of that puzzle to sell something to them. Because the user might be like, this is going to make my day so much faster. I can get through 10 times or twice as much content as I was before. But if the business manager goes, oh, there's no budget for this, and it's having those conversations to understand that and like putting it in metrics that people might understand. We see a lot of businesses that are like, oh, we'll just hire another person and they're going to spend 20, 30,000 pounds on just another admin person. And you go, but our solution is 20, 30,000 pounds. So you're going to spend that on a person for 1 year. We could have built you that so you wouldn't need the extra person. And the next time you get another person, they'll be twice as productive as well. And it's that productivity gain can be really abstract. And finding those realizations, all of that are lessons that we've learned much later on. And I think initially it was just a bit of a mess.
Brilliant. Wow, you've just given us a really good masterclass in marketing there. So thank you so much. That was awesome. Really good.
I don't know if it was a masterclass.
In terms of the team, then you've grown and you've expanded and contracted, and things have happened in terms of that. How have you kept the culture?
That's a good question. But obviously, podcast listeners won't see the array of plants, but culture is plants in this office because there are possibly somewhere in the region of 50 plants in this office. but no, I think some of it has been about the office environment. And I know you'd expect tech people work from home, and actually it's been a struggle that we've had with hiring people. It's like developers work from home. A lot of jobs are really remote. But we do encourage our staff to come in once a week. I don't need them every day, but we all pile into the office at least one day a week. Those that are closer come in. A few of us are in almost every day. But keeping the environment around this has meant that you do get a culture that isn't just talking about work, that is also helpful. And a lot of our staff are junior developers. They're learning. And in order to have a learning atmosphere and to be productive when learning, you need to remove the barriers to asking questions. And someone starting a video or a Slack call or something like that can be a real barrier. And it can make what could have been a 30-second question turn into a 2-minute, 5-minute experience. And that's slow and unproductive for everyone. So I think pulling people into the office by making the office a nice place, like I say, plants, it means we've got artwork up, and it's not like you go around other offices and the artwork is like, here's a photo of our product or like our tower or like that kind of thing, or like digital random code on the wall. We've gone and got artwork that you'd put up in your home, and making that environment, and it can be quite expensive, but the coffee mug you drink out of most of the time is the one in the office. Why is that not the nice coffee mug? Why have you spent all the money on your home coffee mug, which you drink out of only on weekends? And that's kind of been some of the principle of what makes it nice. And I think one of our staff on his exit interview, he described it as something that I really liked as a summary of it. It was like, it was professional friends. Like there's a professional atmosphere, you're doing work, but there's also a friendly one. And doing it's very trendy to do big socials and go do fun things. I know a couple companies have gone to in Bristol, there's just outside Bristol, there's a surfing wave environment, which looks fab. And I actually really would love to do as a company outing, but just doing little bonding experiences, and they don't have to be going out for drinks or something like that. Sometimes it's right, we're going to do a little design day in the office. We're going to get Domino's in and everyone's going to do some mock-ups of something. And it's and then everyone sort of shares what they're doing. And that sharing aspect of it in collaboration has helped keep the atmosphere and culture going.
Yeah.
And kind of allows everyone to also critique things without anyone feeling too personal, because I think that's something you get, especially over remote work. And is that you don't get the tone of voice people are saying things in. People write things quickly and they disregard it. They just give you negative critique because they're going to point out the things you need to change. And there's a fantastic book called Radical Candor, which I'm sure lots of people have read and seen, but it's important also to deliver good feedback. Where you see something really cool, it's just that's really cool. Or put a funny GIF in, and remembering everyone as a human. And there's only so many times you can say great job. Putting a funny GIF in of a cat dancing because you think something's great is actually a really nice human way to keep a relationship going and keep people happy, because it will make them smile. And I think it sounds really silly, but it's something we find in the work we do as well, practical work and deliverable. For a client, when they achieve a goal, you can pop up a message that says done or complete, green tick, wonderful, but it's not going to delight. And emojis is something we use a lot in our work, actually, because people message and interact with emojis so much nowadays, and they're bright, vibrant and colorful and kind of fun. And so we might get the party popper emoji out when you've completed a task, just because it makes you look at something and go, oh, that's different. It's not just text.
Yeah.
And that delight, again, those human interactions mean people want to come back to your platform or reuse what you're doing. Just because, and you don't have to spend lots of money and time making huge confetti explode across the screen. Some of that is fun to do occasionally, but it's also the kind of just putting little bits of human language in and talking to a person like they're a person.
Yeah,
really helps.
Brilliant. And I can remember in the software teams when we introduced the concept of a hackathon once every 6 months. We actually did it once every 4 months in the end in terms of doing that. And they all came together for a day and built something themselves to help themselves. We totally noticed the change in the camaraderie in the spirit of the team. That chance of working together on something for themselves is always awesome. So yeah, brilliant. I love those ideas. So.
No, and actually a good example that reminds me of is like we actually the weirdest thing. It's like it's a weird way of mixing sort of fun with work, right? Which is we had a security day, because obviously we deal with lots of security bits and pieces, and things can be pretty tricky security wise and different levels to reach to. We have to try and keep the whole team abreast of all that's going on. And actually the easiest thing to do with some of that is to designate some time, but it can be so boring. People are doing like e-learning platforms or things like that. And so breaking that up and coming up with a fun way of doing that. And you don't actually have to invest very much time to make it fun. You just need to encourage people to converse about it and suggest tips. Like the password filling tool we use has a keyboard shortcut. And one of the things we did was just like, right, it turns out half the team didn't know the keyboard shortcut existed. And I was like, trust me, just do this command on your keyboard next time. And we made everyone do it in the group. And everyone, like, it's one of those moments everyone went, this is going to save me hours. Because how many times do I have to enter my password a day? It takes me 10 seconds to enter the password, or like click from the drop down which password to use. And then suddenly you're like, hang on, if I just have to press 2 keys, it's not even a second to do that. And it's one of those ones, and making sure everyone's configured on that kind of made it a little bit more fun. And again, you ask everyone to contribute, means you don't have to sit there and prepare a whole day's worth of slides of content to do these things. And I think the thing that puts so many people off doing these kind of like bonding exercises or hackathons or things like that is that the preparation. People think there's loads of prep that you need. I'm sure it sounds like you had it with the hackathons you used to do, and it can be a lot of prep. But honestly, you just need some basic slides and encourage everyone to guide the discussion, because then people also feel like they're bought into the process. They're stakeholders in getting something good out of the day. Otherwise, you just preaching at them and people tune out. And you've got to keep them on board. You've got to make them your advocates for the day, and that can be really hard to do. But it's finding those little ways where you go like, you're now in charge of this bit. How about you make a suggestion? Right, let's do it.
Well, we're getting close to the end now in terms of our conversation. This has been awesome. So, Rupert, where do you want the business to be in 5 years' time?
It's a really good question. I think the consultancy side that we do can be a bit up and downy and stuff. And actually, I think the idea is to get the business to a point where it's very stable. And I think that kind of those SaaS products, I'd like us to transition a little bit to sort of having a few successful SaaS products would be really fun. I think that would also take some of the stress out of the consultancy bit. And I enjoy the consultancy bit from a kind of different challenges, a different everyday kind of side of it. But I would like that to be like the bit I get to enjoy. And then the SaaS side of it becomes that kind of like stable revenue provider and facilitator for us to do that.
Brilliant. Well, Rupert, what a fantastic conversation. We've covered so much ground in the last 45 minutes in terms of, starting off from the growth of a business in a what do you call it, a broken down building, yeah, with your friends, brainstorming ideas of how you're going to storm and take on the world, and actually finding your niche through actually building software and growing. You have the ups and downs of growing, and your team now at 8 in terms of where you are, the difficulty through the COVID years, though it didn't impact you in terms of doing that. But that real sort of understanding of your customers' needs and helping them to really understand how software can help them, but not through a technically way, but in terms of a visual way, getting them to truly understand that and helping them that by creating that concept you talked about, de-risking the process for them in terms of doing that. I thought that was brilliant. And I liked your sort of concept of USP that I wrote down, which is, that you're there on hand, you're enthusiastic, and you're unfairly kind. I think I wrote down there, if I heard that right, in terms of doing that. I mean, what amazing in terms of that. But just the feedback from your team that have left, when you talked about them, saying that the professional friendliness in there.
I think that's the thing that we're most happy with. Like it sounds silly, but like we take in lots of juniors and nurture them, and there is a level that we can't keep them, we can't provide. And I think a big part for us is to get them to be where the best person they can be at the end. And so we're just sort of pipelining them out effectively.
And I think that's absolutely brilliant in terms of your thinking and the structure of that, and where you want to be in 5 years' time. So we always finish with just a few short, sharp questions, quick fire round. So if I may, if you'd go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Probably just be braver in meetings.
Brilliant. Any books you recommend? You've mentioned one already, but
there's the Sprint book, which actually I think it's got some Google IDO bits and pieces in it, and talks you through kind of like how to do things in short, sharp sprints really well. And don't treat it like a Bible; just treat it as interesting.
Brilliant. On your phone, any apps that really have a difference for you?
I'm not going to say Slack, but it's painfully true. I don't know. I have to say, I know it's not very trendy, but I have been on Twitter, now X, since 2012, since the year it launched. I love it. As a developer, there's a great community on there, and it's actually really good for learning and sharing stuff. You just have to find your focus and find your zone on it, find your space.
Brilliant. My favorite question, who's had the most influence on you as a business leader?
Actually, probably one of my business partners' parents. His father has actually been one of those people that I've got to see some of my summer internships with his businesses, and I've got to see him up close making decisions and understanding that. I think also, I would say also my dad, to be fair, he runs his own business, and seeing what that takes, I think, has been really useful to know what level of energy and expectation you have to bring from yourself.
Brilliant. Really good advice. Yes. And finally, Rupert, how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, this. I think I contemplated like giving something away or trying bits and pieces, but I actually honestly think so much of that resource is actually on our website. And I would just tell people to go to mmtm.io. I know that's a bit of a strange one. It's just mmtm.io. But in fact, have a click around there, because there is so much stuff on there to explain what we do and to answer questions. And if you want to jump on and hit the contact us, you can book a Calendly meeting, like schedule a meeting into my calendar, and we can have a conversation and a chat. But I would always suggest that actually there's loads of fantastic stuff on there that kind of explains stuff. And it's something we've been trying to build. I sort of say marketing and sales a week for us initially. It's been something we've been trying to build up massively, is the content on there, so we can answer people's questions so they know that we're the right person for them.
Brilliant. Rupert, thank you so much for this conversation today.
All right, cheers.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way, and you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.